Welcome to this three-part presentation about Introduction to Accreditation. The three parts will be described on the next slide. The overall presentation is not very long, but it covers the basics. Part one of this three-part series is devoted to the fundamentals of assessment and accreditation that are well known in the world of education. Part 2 gets more specific and talks about the Accreditation Board for Engineering and Technology requirements, that's ABET, and the accreditation process we use there. And then Part 3 is more specific to our department in how we are approaching meeting the ABET requirements. Now, most of the presentation's information will be presented here in the narrated slides, but there will be reference to documents that can be found in Blackboard in the group called IME Department ABET Self-Study Documents, and many of those are links to the surveys that we've been using to collect data. Let me start out by saying that assessment and education and accreditation are both very similar to processes found in industry in quality management standards such as AS 9100 and many of the ISO standards. So if you see some similarities, that's because the concepts are very similar in the idea of documentation, identifying who your customers are, figuring out how to deliver what your customer wants, and then assuring and continuously improving what you're doing. So overall, there are three levels of assessment that we're concerned with. The first level is needs assessment. That's where we're trying to figure out what is it that we're trying to accomplish with our program. What is it that our customers are expecting? Then the second level of assessment is assessing how you're doing along the way. How are your processes working that you've set up? And then finally, summative assessment, where you look at your finished product, your outcomes at the end of your program, which in our case is at graduation, and also in the future. And this is where you see how your processes have been working overall. And we assess this 2 times, for example, at graduation and 3 to 5 years after graduation. Assessment requires formal collection of data and analysis and evaluation of it, not just the collective opinions of those people running the programs and their feelings about how it's going. And evidence falls into 2 general categories, subjective and objective. The subjective type of evidence is usually based on opinions, surveys, focus groups, interviews, those kinds of things. And those are acceptable forms of evidence, but many people in assessment feel that if you only rely on subjective assessment, that you may be missing some valuable perspectives. And so the second type of evidence is objective. This is based on data, statistics, experimentation, and the use of experts that are reviewing what they're seeing using a very well thought out rubric. And so it's a combination of these 2 types of evidence that will give you a strong self-study when you're going for assessment and or accreditation. And in the world of ABET, you're a little bit in trouble if all you have is subjective types of evidence. A combination of both is ideal. In the world of assessment, we often use surveys or tests for formative assessment, for example, but we're very concerned that these are valid and reliable survey instruments. So let me discuss these 2 concepts for a minute. First, let's talk about validity. There are 4 kinds of validity that we can check for, and we may only be interested in one, but we may be interested in all 4. The most important or most common is probably content validity, and that is, does the survey or test that you've created actually address the goals of the instrument? And sometimes people will put together a survey, and then when you look at the questions, you realize they don't even attack the purpose of the survey. So how can you guard against that? One way is to use a panel of experts to review a survey or a test, and based on their expertise, they can tell you how the questions are doing in meeting your goals and make many suggestions on how to improve the survey. A second type of validity is criterion validity, and that is, does this particular instrument predict future results? For example, if you're trying to predict the success of a student in terms of grades, does this instrument traditionally do that accurately? Construct validity looks at the underlying constructs or theories or things that are running through your program and predict and identify those. It's a little bit of a deeper concern, and you could use techniques like factor analysis, discriminant analysis, but it's very important in assessment that you're addressing with your overall survey the major underlying constructs of the program. And finally, concurrent validity is, does your instrument give results that agree with other instruments designed to assess the same thing? And if your instrument is not producing results similar to other ones, then maybe there's something wrong with it. The next concept is reliability, and that has to do with the repeatability of a survey. If you were, for example, to give a survey or use an instrument multiple times, does it produce consistent results with the same test takers or instrument takers? Or is it worded such that they could reinterpret things because of vagueness and actually give different results? The other aspect of reliability is, are the people taking the survey or the test actually answering the questions, or are they just checking off boxes? And reliability can be tested for these 2 types of situations. One way is to give an instrument multiple times and look at the results, but we can also check for what's called internal reliability, where we can get a pretty good idea of the reliability of the instrument by taking it in a single use and using particular statistics that will give us a measure of internal reliability. Now, let me say that I do have some concerns with validity and reliability in ABET assessment, and that is, first of all, most people in engineering are not familiar with these concepts, and many ABET reviewers are not familiar with these concepts. And so I've seen instruments and processes used and taught that were not valid and reliable. But anyway, I believe that as time goes on, there will be more and more scrutiny of validity and reliability. In the College of Engineering at Cal Poly Pomona, we find ourselves concerned with 2 different accrediting agencies and 2 different accreditations. The first is regional accreditation, and our regional accrediting agency is WASC, the Western Association of Schools and Colleges. The country is divided into 6 regions for accreditation purposes, and each region has its own accrediting agency to assure that institutions as a whole are satisfactorily meeting the needs of the mission of their organization. And so WASC is our regional accrediting agency. Then for engineering, the Accreditation Board for Engineering and Technology, they accredit engineering, engineering technology, computer science, and a few other types of programs. And it's very important if you're in engineering that you're accredited by ABET. There are some universities, some colleges that may be not WASC accredited. For example, some faith-based colleges are accredited by other accrediting agencies. But there are similarities in WASC and ABET. They both want evidence of careful determination of your outcomes. They want to see how you developed your mission, vision, and your assessment processes. They want evidence that your curriculum, facilities, and faculty are adequate to deliver the outcomes. And although not shown in this bullet, another major factor is, do you have institutional support for your program? That is for both the facilities and for the administration and all the support services that you need, and all of the, for example, GE courses and everything that's used to support your program. Are those all adequate as well? So after assuring that the program is designed properly, they want to see if it's functioning as intended. And then finally, they want evidence that the program is continuously improving in areas that it's important to make some progress. WASC is on a 10-year cycle, and they have multiple visits built into their process, and they are very assessment oriented. WASC is probably, in my personal opinion, one of the more thorough of the regional accrediting agencies. Then finally for ABET, they're on a 6-year cycle, and you want to get a full 6-year accreditation if you can, but if they find weaknesses or deficiencies, they may give you a lesser accreditation time, like 3 years, and then that way they visit sooner to see if you've corrected your deficiencies. With ABET, one interesting difference with other compared to other accrediting agencies is they actually prescribe some of the outcomes, and then you can add additional outcomes if you want. And we call those A through K for the last few accrediting cycles, but be aware that as of this recording, they are considering revising A through K, and that will probably take place before our next visit, which means we'll have to adapt. They want evidence of continuous improvement and stakeholder participation. They also are organized where they send in a team to typically credit all your programs at one time. The team has some leadership. They have one visitor per program being reviewed, and then typically there will be some observers coming along who are people that are in training to become visitors themselves. Now let me add, I've been through 5 ABET accreditation cycles, 5 visits. I've helped write most of those self-studies, and I've always been involved with the visitors in some form. And let me say that while most of them are fairly helpful and very knowledgeable, they do vary in what they focus on, and they do vary in their understanding of the assessment process. So if you do have something that's a weakness or a concern, you never really know if it's going to be considered a major concern or if it's going to be considered minor. I could give some examples, but I'll refrain from that. Anyway, hopefully this has been helpful in giving you some understanding of the overall processes involved.